December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, 7:48 in the morning. And above the chaos, above the burning battleships and exploding aircraft, something appears, something American pilots have never seen before. Small, nimble, impossibly fast, and deadly. A Japanese fighter aircraft, painted in dark green, red circles on the wings, tearing through American formations like they're standing still. Zeros, Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters. And within hours, they've destroyed nearly 300 American aircraft. On the ground, in the air. Doesn't matter. The Zero dominates completely. And American pilots who survive report the same thing. We had no chance. It turned inside us, climbed faster, outranged us. We couldn't touch it. And military analysts look at the reports and reach a terrifying conclusion. Japan has the best fighter aircraft in the world, and we have nothing that can match it. Now, here's the thing. They were right. In December 1941, the Zero was, objectively, the best carrier-based fighter on the planet. Better than anything America had. Better than anything Britain had. Better maneuverability. Better range. Better rate of climb. And for the first 6 months of the Pacific War, the Zero was untouchable. Japanese pilots called it the Divine Wind. American pilots called it the Devil's Chariot. And the kill ratio numbers tell the story. In early 1942, for every Zero lost, Japan shot down, on average, 12 Allied aircraft. 12-1. That's not a battle. That's a massacre. But here's what makes this story fascinating. By 1944, just 3 years later, the Zero had become a death trap. A flying coffin. American pilots were shooting them down at a rate of 19-1. 19. The aircraft hadn't changed, but everything else had. And the question is, how? How does the best fighter in the world become obsolete in 3 years? The answer isn't what you think. Let me tell you about Jiro Horikoshi, because this story starts with him. 1937. Horikoshi is a young Japanese aeronautical engineer working for Mitsubishi. Brilliant, innovative, and he gets assigned to a project. The Imperial Japanese Navy wants a new carrier-based fighter, and they have requirements, specific requirements. Maximum speed over 300 miles per hour, range over 1,500 miles, endurance 6 to 8 hours, rate of climb better than any existing fighter, maneuverability, tighter turning radius than anything flying, and armament, 2 20mm cannons plus 2 7.7mm machine guns. Oh, and it needs to operate from aircraft carriers, which means it needs to be able to land at low speeds, which means it needs large wings, which means it will be heavy, unless. Horikoshi looks at these requirements, does the math, and realizes something. It's impossible. You can't have all of those things. Physics doesn't allow it. Speed requires power. Power requires a heavy engine. A heavy engine requires a strong airframe. A strong airframe adds weight. Weight reduces range. Weight reduces maneuverability. Weight reduces rate of climb. You can't have everything. You have to compromise. Every aircraft designer knows this. You pick your priorities. And you sacrifice something. American designers sacrificed range for armor and firepower. British designers sacrificed speed for stability. German designers sacrificed production simplicity for performance. Every design is a trade-off, but the Japanese Navy doesn't want trade-offs. They want everything, and they tell Horikoshi, figure it out. So Horikoshi does something radical. He decides to sacrifice everything that keeps pilots alive. No armor plating, none. No self-sealing fuel tanks, no redundant systems, no extra structural strength. He builds the airframe out of the lightest materials possible, uses a new aluminum alloy, ultra lightweight, strong enough, barely. He makes the skin as thin as he can, shaves weight everywhere. The landing gear, the cockpit, the instrument panel, everything, and it works. The aircraft he designs weighs 3,700 pounds empty. 3,700. For comparison, an American F-4F Wildcat, the Zero's main early opponent, weighs 5,700 pounds empty. The Zero is nearly 2,000 pounds lighter, and that weight savings translates into performance. Incredible performance. 1940, the prototype flies, and it's exactly what the Navy wanted. Top speed, 330 miles per hour. Range, 1,900 miles. Rate of climb, 4,000 feet per minute. Turn radius, unmatched. It can outturn anything. And the Navy is thrilled. They order it into production immediately. Name it the Type 0 carrier fighter, because it enters service in the year 2600, the Japanese calendar year, which corresponds to 1940. Western calendar, Type 0. The Americans will call it the Zero, and in 1940, 1941, it is, unquestionably, the most advanced carrier fighter in the world. But here's what the Navy doesn't want to hear. Horikoshi warns them. He writes in his report, quote, "This aircraft achieves its performance through extreme weight reduction. It has no armor protection for the pilot. No self-sealing fuel tanks. A single bullet in the fuel tank will cause catastrophic fire. A single hit to the airframe may cause structural failure. This aircraft is only effective if it avoids being hit. If engaged by enemy fire, pilot survivability is extremely low." End quote. The Navy reads this and ignores it because in 1940, in 1941, Japanese doctrine is based on one principle. Offense. Attack first, attack hard. Don't get hit. If you're skilled enough, fast enough, aggressive enough, you won't get hit. And if you do get hit, well, that's what the samurai code is for. Die with honor. Horikoshi tries again. Suggests adding armor, adding self-sealing tanks. Says it will only add 300 pounds. 300. The Navy refuses. Says the weight will ruin the performance. And performance is everything. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. And the Zero proves the Navy right. American fighters, the F-4F Wildcats, try to engage, and they can't. The Zero outturns them, outclimbs them, outranges them. American pilots report that in a turning fight, the Zero is unbeatable, absolutely unbeatable. It can turn inside any American fighter, which means in a dogfight, the Zero always gets the shot, always, and American pilots die in droves. The kill ratios are devastating, and American commanders realize something terrifying. We're outclassed completely. Our tactics don't work. Our aircraft are inferior. And if we keep fighting this way, we're going to lose. Now, let me tell you about Lieutenant Commander John Thatch, United States Navy, Fighter Squadron Commander. And in early 1942, Thatch has a problem. His pilots are dying. They're engaging Zeros and losing every time. And Thatch, he's not just a pilot. He's a tactician. He studies the Zero, reads the combat reports, interviews survivors, and he realizes something. The Zero's strength, its maneuverability, is also a weakness because the Zero dominates in one-on-one turning fights. But what if you don't fight one-on-one? What if you fight as a team? And Thatch develops something, a tactic. He calls it the Thatch Weave. Here's how it works. Two American fighters fly together. Not close, wide spacing, maybe half a mile apart, and they fly in a weaving pattern, crossing paths. When a Zero attacks one fighter, that fighter turns toward his wingman. The Zero follows, commits, and the other fighter, the wingman, now has a perfect shot at the Zero's side, or tail. The Zero has to break off, and if it doesn't, it gets shot. It's simple, elegant, and it works. Because the Thatch Weave doesn't try to outturn the Zero, it uses teamwork, mutual support, and suddenly, American pilots have a chance. Not a great chance, but a chance. June 4th, 1942. Battle of Midway, and this is where everything changes. Not because of the Thatch Weave, but because of what happens to Japanese carriers. 4 Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, all sunk in one day, and with them, most of Japan's experienced carrier pilots. Because here's the thing about carrier operations. Landing on a carrier is hard, really hard. It takes months of training, and Japan had maybe 200 truly skilled carrier pilots. Pilots who could land on a carrier at night, in bad weather, under combat conditions, and at Midway, most of them died, went down with the carriers, or were shot down. And Japan can't replace them, because training new carrier pilots takes time and resources, and Japan is running out of both. So what does Japan do? They lower the training standards. New pilots get 50 hours of flight time, 50, before being sent to combat. For comparison, American pilots in 1942 got 200 hours. By 1943, American pilots got 300 hours. Japan is sending barely trained pilots into combat, in aircraft that have no margin for error, no armor, no protection. One mistake, one hit, dead, and the kill ratios start changing. Not immediately, but gradually. By late 1942, the ratio is 6-1, still in Japan's favor, but shrinking. Let me tell you about Saburo Sakai, Japanese ace. 64 confirmed victories, one of the best, and in August 1942, Sakai is flying near Guadalcanal, and he spots what he thinks is a formation of American fighters. He attacks, gets close, and realizes, too late, it's not fighters, it's bombers, SBD Dauntless Dive bombers, and they have rear gunners. Sakai takes a burst of 50 caliber fire, right through the cockpit. Bullets hit his head, his eye, his shoulder, blood everywhere. He's blinded in one eye, partially paralyzed, and his Zero is still flying, because the engine is okay, the airframe is okay, but Sakai is dying, and he's 400 miles from base, 400 miles, over open ocean, barely conscious, and he flies back 4 hours. Can't see properly, can't feel half his body, but he flies, lands barely and survives, spends months recovering, returns to combat, fights for the rest of the war with one eye. Now, here's the thing about Sakai's story. He survived because he was skilled enough to fly a damaged Zero for 4 hours while half dead. But most pilots aren't Saburo Sakai. Most pilots, if they take hits like that, die. Because the Zero doesn't forgive mistakes. And by 1943, American pilots have figured out the other weakness. The Zero can't dive fast, because the lightweight airframe can't handle the stress. High-speed dives will rip the wings off. So American pilots develop a new tactic. Boom and zoom. Dive from altitude. High speed. Take a shot. Keep diving. Don't turn. Don't try to dogfight. Just dive away. And the Zero can't follow. If it tries to dive at 400 miles per hour, the wings fold. Structural failure. And the Zero falls out of the sky. American aircraft, by contrast, are built like tanks. The F-6F Hellcat, armored cockpit, self-sealing fuel tanks, strong airframe. It weighs 9,000 pounds empty, more than twice what a Zero weighs. It's slower in a turn, climbs slower, but it can dive, and it can take hits, lots of hits. Hellcat pilots report taking 20, 30, 50 bullet hits, and still making it home. A Zero takes 5 hits, maybe 10, and it's done. Burning, falling, dead. 1943, and American industry is ramping up. Essex-class carriers are launching. Each carrier holds 80 aircraft, and America is building carriers, aircraft, pilots, faster than Japan can destroy them. Japan, by contrast, is running out of everything. Fuel, metal, pilots. The Zero production continues, but the pilots flying them are increasingly inexperienced, and inexperienced pilots in Zeros die. Quickly, because the Zero demands perfection. Perfect situational awareness, perfect gunnery, perfect tactics. One mistake and you're dead. There's no armor to save you. No redundant systems, nothing. And 19-year-old kids with 50 hours of training don't fly perfectly. Let me tell you about November 1943. Rabaul, Japanese base in New Guinea. American carriers launch a strike. Zeros scramble, 90 Zeros, against roughly 50 American fighters. Hellcats, and the Americans have altitude, energy, they dive. Boom and zoom. The Zeros try to turn, try to engage in the dogfights they're designed for. But the Hellcats don't cooperate. They dive, fire, zoom away, climb, reset. The Zeros chase. But they can't keep up in a dive. And when they try to climb after the Hellcats, they're slow. Vulnerable. American pilots pick them off, one by one. The battle lasts maybe 30 minutes. And when it's over, the Americans have lost 3 aircraft, 3. The Japanese have lost 41 Zeros, shot down. Most of the pilots are dead. A few bail out into the ocean. And most of them drown or are strafed. It's not a battle, it's a slaughter. And it happens again, and again, and again. By 1944, the Zero is obsolete. Not because it changed, but because everything else did. American tactics evolved. American aircraft improved. American pilots got better training. And the Zero, frozen in 1940 design, can't compete. Japan tries to upgrade it, adds a more powerful engine. The Sakai engine is replaced with the Kinsei. More horsepower, but the airframe can't handle it. The extra power causes structural stress. And besides, it doesn't matter, because the fundamental problem isn't power, it's survivability. And Japan can't fix that without redesigning the entire aircraft, which would take years, and resources Japan doesn't have. So what does Japan do? They keep building Zeros, keep sending pilots out in them, because what else can they do? They have no alternative. The newer Japanese fighters, the J-2M Raiden, the N-1K Shiden, they're good, but production numbers are tiny. Japan built 10,000 Zeros, and only a few hundred of the newer types. So pilots keep flying Zeros into 1945, and they keep dying. Let me tell you about the Marianas Turkey Shoot, June 19th, 1944, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Japan launches 373 aircraft against American carriers, the largest carrier battle of the war, and the Americans have radar. They see the Japanese coming. Hours in advance, they launch 450 Hellcats. The Japanese formation, it's mostly Zeros, flown by pilots with, on average, less than 100 hours of training. The Americans have altitude, they dive. And what happens next is a massacre. The Japanese lose 300 aircraft. 300 in one day. The Americans lose 29. American pilots later describe it as shooting turkeys, because that's what it was, target practice. The Zeros flown by inexperienced pilots had no chance. None. They turned, they tried to fight, and they died in flames, or spiraling into the ocean, or exploding in midair. It was carnage. And here's the tragedy. Many of those pilots, they knew they were going to die. Japanese pilots in late 1944, they write letters home before missions, last letters, because they don't expect to return. One pilot, his name was Toshio Yoshitake, 19 years old, wrote to his mother, quote, "I know I will not survive. I know this. But I will do my duty. I will try to take one enemy with me. Please forgive me for not being able to come home." End quote. He died the next day, shot down by a Hellcat. His Zero caught fire. He didn't bail out. Probably couldn't. The fire was too fast. He was 19. Now, let's talk about why Japan didn't fix this. Because they knew. Japanese engineers knew the Zero was obsolete. They proposed upgrades. Armoured versions, heavier but survivable. The Navy refused, said it would reduce performance, said the samurai spirit would compensate. And here's the thing, that's not strategy, that's delusion. You can't compensate for engineering weaknesses with fighting spirit. Physics doesn't care about morale. A bullet through your fuel tank will kill you regardless of how brave you are. And the Japanese High Command, they never understood this. Or they understood it and didn't care. Because by 1944, Japan isn't fighting to win. They're fighting to not lose. To inflict enough casualties that America negotiates, and pilots are expendable. Aircraft are expendable. Everything is expendable. accept honor. Let me tell you about Lieutenant Junior Grade Alex Vrasiu, American ace, 19 confirmed victories, and on June 19th, 1944, during the Marianas Turkey shoot, Vrasiu shoots down 6 Zeros in 8 minutes. 6 in 8 minutes. He describes it later, says, "They were so inexperienced. They flew straight, didn't check their 6, didn't maneuver. I just lined up, fired. They exploded. Next target, line up, fire, explode." He pauses, it was sad. These were kids, barely trained, flying outdated aircraft, and they didn't stand a chance. I felt like an executioner, not a fighter pilot, an executioner. That's what the Zero had become by 1944. Not a weapon, a coffin, a flying coffin, that Japan kept building and kept sending young men out in, because they had no choice, and because their doctrine, their culture, their entire military philosophy couldn't accept the reality that sometimes you lose, sometimes the enemy is better, and sometimes the best thing you can do is stop, negotiate, save lives. But Japan didn't stop, and the Zeros kept flying, and the pilots kept dying. 1945, and Japan is losing, badly. American bombers are hitting Japanese cities, B-29s, high altitude, and the Zeros can't stop them, can't climb high enough, can't catch them. And when they do catch them, the B-29 gunners shoot them down, because Zeros have no armor. A burst of 50 caliber fire, and they're done. So Japan tries something new, kamikaze. If you can't win in combat, crash into the enemy. Use the Zero as a missile, and thousands of young pilots, some volunteers, most not, fly Zeros loaded with bombs, straight into American ships, and die. On purpose. Because that's what the Zero has become. Not a fighter, a guided bomb, piloted by teenagers who have no training, no chance, and no choice. Let me tell you about the last Zero missions. August 1945. The war is ending. Japan is about to surrender, and a handful of Zeros, the last operational ones, fly from Japanese bases. Not to fight, just to be seen. To show that Japan still has aircraft, still has pilots, still has something. They encounter American fighters, Hellcats, Corsairs. The Americans shoot them down, easily. The Zeros fall into the ocean. And that's it. The Zeros' war is over. The aircraft that dominated 1941, that was untouchable, unbeatable. The divine wind ends the war as a relic, obsolete, outclassed, a death trap. So let's talk about legacy. Because the Zero is remembered in different ways by different people. In Japan, it's remembered as a symbol of innovation, of what Japanese engineering could achieve, the best carrier fighter of its time. In America, it's remembered as the enemy fighter, deadly in early war, but ultimately defeated by better tactics, better aircraft, better training. But here's what often gets forgotten. The Zero wasn't defeated by a better aircraft. It was defeated by a better system. America didn't build a fighter that could outturn the Zero. They built tactics that made turning irrelevant. They built aircraft that could absorb damage. They built training programs that produced skilled pilots. They built an industrial base that could replace losses. And they built a doctrine that valued pilot survival. Japan had none of that, and that's why the Zero went from the best to a death trap. Not because the aircraft changed, but because Japan couldn't adapt. And here's the final irony. Jiro Horikoshi, the man who designed the Zero, he survived the war, lived until 1982, and in his later years, he was interviewed, asked about the Zero, about his legacy, and he said, quote, "I designed the aircraft the Navy wanted. I warned them about the weaknesses. They didn't listen. I'm proud of the engineering, the performance, but I'm not proud of how it was used. How many young men died in aircraft that could have been safer if the Navy had listened, if doctrine had been different? The Zero could have been great. Instead, it became a symbol of how pride and stubbornness and refusal to adapt can turn a masterpiece into a coffin." End quote. 330 miles per hour, 1900-mile range, incredible maneuverability, no armor, no protection, no mercy. That was the Zero, the best fighter of 1941 and the death trap of 1944. And the lesson isn't about aircraft, it's about adaptation, about recognizing when your strengths become weaknesses, about valuing survival over pride, and about understanding that, in war, the side that learns faster wins, and the side that refuses to learn, no matter how skilled, no matter how brave, loses, and sends thousands of young men to die in flying coffins, painted green, with red circles on the wings.